Today is August 31st, 2023, and I'm going to give a short talk on the fires that just happened recently in Maui, the island of Maui, and the government response to that fire, and how this is a really tragic example of a power dynamic that shouldn't exist in the first place. And if you understand the details of that, if you clarify what that power dynamic is and exactly why it's wrong and exactly how to end that dynamic, tragedies like this can be prevented. A lot of people are upset at the government response, but I don't hear anybody talking about the particular solution and the particular fundamental problem, which is really a blunder of ethics, believing that this relationship with the government is beneficial in the first place, which then allows things like this to occur over and over and over again. So, last I've heard, there's hundreds of people that have died in this fire, in these fires that, first of all, do not appear to be natural. They seem more like it was a directed energy weapon used to just kind of laser through certain portions of the island, and you can see demarcation in the ground where something, of extreme high temperature was just going through, and then just, a few feet away, everything is untouched, and cars melting, and, there's a lot of debate as to whether this could have occurred naturally. But what there can be zero debate about is the response, right? So, as countless people there have been testifying, first of all, the water was turned off, so they weren't able to put out the fire. Why would they turn off the water? Why? And also, why wasn't the alarms turned on, right? Apparently, Maui has one of the most extensive and advanced crisis alarm systems, for a population, and yet it was never even turned on in the first place. And then, possibly worst of all, I guess equally bad with turning the water off, was blocking the exits. The police were preventing people from actually exiting where the fire was worse, right? So they're putting roadblocks up. It just seems to be the worst kind of sinister land grab, where they purposely wanted to destroy the homes and the people, women and children. And, speaking of the children, the schools were closed that day for some reason. I've heard that over and over, but I haven't heard an explanation as to why they were closed. So it seems that could be another really sinister, even satanic element to what occurred. So horrible deaths, horrible suffering, and then, insult added to injury. They are offered, money to buy their land by the investment firm or whatever they call themselves, and that wants to push forward this so-called green agenda, turning, increasing portions of, society into these so-called green cities where everything is, or 15-minute cities where everyone is basically corralled into these surveillance grid, urban control grids But I don't want to digress too much on that. What I believe is called Agenda 2030 basically is that they want everyone to be in these urban farms for humans. But that does point actually to the specific solution that I was saying I would get to. So I'll just briefly mention that now and then come back around to it. So if, just to make things simple, imagine the devil is real and he has an agenda. And say that agenda is something like this, where it's just to have complete control over people, complete totalitarianism, have everyone in these city control grids, right? If that were true, what would the solution be, right? If the intent is pure evil and nothing good about it can be found, what would you imagine the solution would be, or what logically would be the solution to that agenda? Well, it would be the complete opposite, right? It would be the complete opposite of whatever the devil's trying to achieve. So what is the complete opposite of people being treated like livestock and controlled and, corralled into these urban centers where they're under surveillance and, severe regulation all the time? Well, the complete opposite of that would be people recognized as sovereign individuals in the first place, and secondly, having land of their own so they could live naturally outside of a urban artificial control grid, right? So sovereign individuals on sovereign homesteads forming voluntary communities would be the complete opposite of this agenda, right? So therefore, that would be the good solution, right? Because it doesn't have any of the negative intention or abuses that the former plan has, right? Pretty straightforward, yet again, I hear zero people talking about it. So what is the power dynamic fundamentally? To understand that, we got to just remind ourselves, well, what are we talking about when we say power, right? I'm sure you've all heard of the phrase power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. But let's just stick with power corrupts, right? Most people agree that when people get some kind of unnatural amount of power over people, it oftentimes goes to their head, so to speak, and they do bad things with that power, right? Political history is just filled with countless examples. And then what just happened here in August 2023 in Maui is another huge example. And, the medical tyranny that has preceded it, and they're now talking about bringing back, where the government issues mandates for medical devices and injections, which of course can be harmful and regardless of their efficacy is immoral because you own your own body and someone shouldn't have the right to force you or coerce you to use whatever medicine or so-called medicine and devices that they say are most beneficial, right? So that example points to what this power that corrupts actually is. So I'm going to read definition here from the New World Dictionary of American English, 3rd College edition. So second definition is a specific ability or faculty. Number 3, a great ability to do, act, or affect strongly with force. Number 4, the ability to control others. Authority. Okay. Special authority assigned to or exercised by a person or group holding office. Legal ability or authority. Also, a document giving it. Okay. Now let me look at another dictionary here, which I find to be a consistently high quality one. This is the Concise Oxford American Dictionary. And what does it say for power? Well, it says, number 2, the capacity or ability to direct or influence the behavior of others or the course of events. political or social authority or control, especially that exercised by government. A right or authority that is given or delegated to a person or body. And then it gives the example here: police do not have the power to stop and search, which makes me kind of roll my eyes a little bit. But let's pinpoint exactly what this power is then. So a power is this special ability or right to control others, is one of the valid definitions of power. And when we talk about power corrupting, that's the kind we're talking about, right? We're not talking about, that awesome 1,000 horsepower, restored muscle car. We're talking about political power. We're talking about coercive ability, right? And where does it come from? Well, as the dictionary I just quoted stated, it's a power that can just be given by a certain document, right? So we have constitutions for all these governments. And what is in these constitutions, right? The power is given to them by just writing the words on paper to tax, right? We have the power to tax the people, right? In order to generate the revenue we need to, quote unquote, represent them, right? So this power to tax, right? And in the United States, we then, much later had, straight out of the Communist Manifesto, also words on paper, taken the idea of an income tax, right? So in 1913, we had the 16th Amendment to the Constitution added, which is just gave the government the power to tax income, right? They just wrote it on a piece of paper, and then they all said, yeah, enough of them said, yeah, this is a great idea. Thanks, Karl Marx, for writing this down on your Communist Manifesto. We'll take that one. Oh, along with the central banking idea. Thanks for that idea too. And we'll put both of them. We'll start both right here in back to back in 1913, and most people won't even notice that we've just basically turned the communism knob up several notches all in 1 year. But we'll just keep on calling this the land of the free and move forward. Anyway, so this power is just given by writing words on paper. We have the power to tax. Okay, now you have the power to tax. So what does this represent, though, on a more fundamental level? This ability. What is this ability that they're giving themselves? For example, it's an ability that to do something coercive, to do something abusive that other people do not have the right to do, right? They've given themselves a right to do something that is otherwise considered criminal. So that's really what power is. So I'm going to repeat that just to make it ultra clear. When we're talking about corrupting power, politics, and other institutions, it's in this context, to make sense of what's been going on in the world and how to solve it. It's key to recognize that when the word power is used, what they're talking about specifically is the exemption to the rule against abuse, right? So, for example, normally if there's a fire in a neighborhood and people are trying to escape, right? And you then put up a roadblock preventing them from leaving, right? You got no good reason to give, right? You're just doing it and saying, well, I'm the authority here, and I think it'd be better, to block you in after I cut off your water supply, right? Normally, right, or I should say among like quote unquote normal people, that would be considered very criminal, right? That would be considered like psychotic and possibly satanic, like you're just willfully intending to harm others through some insane act like blocking people into, it's like, locking people in a building that's on fire, that's extremely evil, right? Extremely criminal. But that's apparently basically what happened there, right? So, but why is it not, why are those people not immediately, considered criminal or treated as such, right? Because they're the authorities, right? So, well, yeah, normally that would be considered insane and evil, but since they're the authority, it's like, oh, now there's a gray area, supposedly, right? So people have been given this power, which is just the ability to do things that are otherwise recognized as unethical. And, supposedly when they do it, it's somehow not unethical, or we might do some kind of investigation, but, they're going to investigate themselves for the most part, and, most of the time have little to no consequences, right? So this is the main blunder, is giving people the permission, the allowance to be abusive in the first place, and then hoping things are going to work out. Well, as we can see, it doesn't work out. If you give people an exemption and say, well, if you get into some kind of government employment, well, you basically can get away with being abusive, things that would otherwise be criminal. Well, it's not criminal as long as you're working for them. Well, guess who's going to be attracted to those positions of power, right? Abusive people that want to be abusive, right? So the idea that like government protects you from abusive people makes no sense. You're establishing an institution that is going to be attractive to abusive people so they can then carry out their abusive without any consequence. It's just complete irrationality, and people are just indoctrinated to believe that it's somehow good. They get paid either way. People talk about like vote with your dollar. Like there's been success with boycotting certain companies, right? Like a company does something you don't like, pushes some advertising that you find unethical, and you boycott the company, and then it can potentially go out of business, right? So there's a real consequence to whatever the corporation did, losing all their customers, right? But a government never loses their customers because the taxes are taken automatically. Right? When you get your paycheck, it's like minus so many hundreds of dollars, right? For the income tax, right? Just every paycheck, right? When you do whatever kind of financial exchange, right? And the taxes are just, added on, taken away from you, automatically, right? So they're getting paid. They're getting paid regardless of whatever they do. You can't boycott them. So you've given them these positions of power. And then on top of that, you allow them to be funded automatically and continuously. And you think that's going to work out. And you think that's the way to have a so-called civilized society. It makes zero sense. You're just setting up one disaster after another and an increasingly totalitarian, crappy world, which is exactly what we're observing. Maui again being a huge current example. So the solution is not complicated, right? Is it okay for you to go to your neighbor and say, I'm going to take whatever percentage from whatever money you earn from your labor every month, and but don't worry, I'm going to I'll do some good things with it. You just trust me, and flu season's coming up, and I really like this one particular pharmaceutical concoction. To me, it just seems the best. So I'm going to need you and all your children to take it. And, if there's any updates or, additional shots that I think would be best, I'm going to, need you all to take those too, and probably want to mask up your faces, indefinitely too, and, right? Like that abuse of control would be considered criminal if a so-called ordinary person were to do it. So the idea that other people that are, have this power, it's okay for them to do it. It's just really dumb, and it makes no sense, and there's no sound ethics behind it. It's just authoritarianism, and the people that go along with it are basically just idol worshippers. So to conclude, tragedies like this repeat over and over because people have been given the authority to commit abuse without consequence. And not only have they been given the A-OK to have the moral exception to do things that would otherwise be considered unethical and criminal, but they're funded to carry out these deeds automatically and continuously by everyone in the population that they supposedly serve and represent, but are really just people that are being farmed like livestock, and they just want to intensify that farming, make it even more concentrated and controlled, which is what this smart city, so supposedly to save the environment, is all about. So again, what is the solution? It's the complete opposite. It's not accepting taxation as legitimate. It's recognizing individual sovereignty, right? That goes one and the same. If someone's a sovereign, you can't abusively control them and treat them like your subject, right? And commit extortion against them, which is what taxation is. I could look in this dictionary right here and look up the word extortion, and it would describe exactly what taxation is. Of course, statists would argue that's not the case, and they would say also that in the case of medical tyranny, you're not really being forced. They're not like holding you down and putting needles in your arm, but of course ignoring all the coercive measures that back the mandate, right? If you don't take this injection, you can't go to work, you can't travel, right? That coercion does count as force. It does count as abuse of control. And speaking of that kind of coercion, they're talking about getting rid of cash and making it a cashless society where we use electronic money, electronic currency, which can then, of course, be used as an extreme form of control. Again, you don't agree with this policy, or you won't go along with this mandate. Well, you no longer have use of your electronic money, so you can't buy food, you can't pay the rent, right? And again, how does all of this control get started? Well, it gets started by denying individual sovereignty and denying your right to sovereign land, water, and seed so that you can live freely and independently and naturally on the earth. If you were on a ship with a bunch of people and got lost and ended up, shipwrecked on a uninhabited island, that is the scenario we should all be actually thinking of ourselves in. Okay, what would we do in that scenario? Well, we'd all share the fresh water and the land and give each other space, some private space, and we would operate on the principle of no abuse is acceptable, right? So we wouldn't allow some people to commit extortion against other people, right? We would just share the water, land, and seed and respect each other's sovereignty, autonomy, and have voluntary relations, right? Very simple, right? That very simple solution or strategy that most people would come to if they had that scenario happen to them. That's exactly what should be the agenda or strategy employed worldwide now. it's the same solution. It doesn't change because you were born on a continent that's already inhabited and already has these extortionists doing their thing. It doesn't change the ethics, doesn't change the reality of human beings on the planet Earth and right and wrong. So that's what it is. Sovereignty, birthrights to homesteading land, water, and seed. That's how you prevent these horrific, abusive tragedies like just happened in Maui. That's how you prevent medical tyranny. That's how you prevent disarming nonviolent people and genocide. So this will probably be shadow banned, but maybe one or two people will be able to hear it anyway. All right, thanks for listening.